a Bugatti. Sometimes I need a woman just to come caress my body. Sometimes I want a man just to hold me all night, yeah. Just to hold me all night. Oh, I need an out invention. Open-minded by invention. Vicarious, causing attention. I'm low on retention. I hope I get some peachy gotta hit it like a quick.
Justice for the family and friends of Breneisha Lightfoot. Today, a judge found her boyfriend guilty of involuntary manslaughter, tampering with evidence, and gross abuse of a corpse.
After more than 7 months since Bedford police found Breneisha Lightfoot's body in Cleveland's Slavic Village neighborhood, friends of Lightfoot say they're happy justice is being served.
Anytime you lose somebody of that caliber of character in that young lady, it will forever haunt you.
It was July 18th, 2023, and Breneisha's sister hadn't heard from Breneisha in days. She called her phone and it rang once, twice, 3 times, then straight to voicemail. Breneisha's sister stared at her phone screen, a knot forming in her stomach. This wasn't like her. Breneisha Lightfoot, known to her fans as Ahlotta, never went silent. Not during her birthday week, not ever. Breneisha was Cleveland's rising rap star, a young woman who lit up every room she entered. So where was she now? Her family called the police requesting a welfare check. Officers drove to her building, not knowing they were about to walk into a scene that would haunt them forever.
A concerned family member called the police on July 18th asking for a welfare check.
They hadn't heard from her. Her birthday was coming up that day, and it was very unusual for her to not make contact every day.
Soon, Bedford police became concerned too when they arrived at the apartment.
When they stepped inside Breneisha's apartment, what they found made their blood run cold. Evidence of violence, signs of a struggle, and Breneisha's phone sitting there like a silent witness to something terrible. But Breneisha herself, she was nowhere to be found.
We found what appeared to be a crime scene with blood. No one was home at the residence, and that's where the investigation started.
The search began immediately. 3 days later, on a Friday morning, a call came in that shattered a community and ended a family's worst nightmare in the most heartbreaking way possible. This is the story of Breneisha Lightfoot. Stay tuned as we reveal how her promising life was cut short by someone who was supposed to protect her. Welcome to Crazy Dark Files. Please like this video, share and subscribe to this channel to help raise awareness and spread caution.
It's still very hard to digest. You know, her death is very hard to digest.
This story takes us to Cleveland, Ohio, a resilient city nestled along the southern shore of Lake Erie that has weathered decades of economic transformation. It was once a powerhouse of American industry. While the city has faced challenges with crime rates that have historically been above national averages, Cleveland has made significant strides in urban revitalization.
On Wednesday, Judge Dina R. Calabrese found Lightfoot's boyfriend, Michael Rorty Nugent, guilty of involuntary manslaughter, tampering with evidence and gross abuse against a human corpse.
It's just a tragedy that it had to end like that, especially like that.
Born and raised in Cleveland, Breneisha grew up in a close, kit-knit family that valued hard work, loyalty, and giving back to the community. From an early age, she showed a fierce determination that would define everything she did in life. Her family remembers a young woman who never did anything halfway. When Breneisha set her mind to something, she gave it everything she had. This drive showed up in every part of her life, from her music career to her community work to the way she treated the people around her. As she grew older, Breneisha discovered her passion for music. She started performing under the stage name Ahlotta and quickly made a name for herself in Cleveland's rap scene.
That new Vicarious, my new single that just dropped on all streaming platforms. The link is in the bio. Make sure y'all tap in with me. Go check that out. It's streaming on all streaming platforms, YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify. Tap in with your girl and go get that.
Her music wasn't just about beats and rhymes. It was about telling real stories, sharing real experiences, and connecting with people who understood the struggles of growing up in urban America. But what made Breneisha special wasn't just her talent on the microphone. She had this natural ability to light up any room she walked into. Friends and family described her as someone who could make you laugh, even on your worst day. She was the person everyone turned to when they needed advice, support, or just someone to listen. Her music career as Ahlotta was taking off, but Breneisha never forgot where she came from. She understood that success meant nothing if you didn't use it to help others. That's what led her to get involved with the Wolfpack Gunshot Response Team, a community organization that taught life-saving skills to young people in Cleveland. The Wolfpack wasn't just another community group, it was a lifeline for kids who lived in neighborhoods where violence was a daily reality.
Shakur worked with Lightfoot on an initiative called the Wolfpack Gunshot Response Team to teach kids how to pack gunshot, knife, and bomb wounds. He says her presence is missed, but they carry on in her honor.
Breneisha worked directly with these children, teaching them how to respond to emergencies, how to help someone who'd been shot, and most importantly, how to stay safe in dangerous situations. The kids she worked with absolutely loved her. She wasn't just another adult telling them what to do, she was someone who understood their world, someone who had walked similar streets and faced similar challenges. When Breneisha talked, they listened. When she taught them something, they remembered it. One young person she mentored later said that Breneisha saved his life, not just through the emergency response training, but by showing him that someone cared about whether he lived or died. She had this way of making each kid feel like they mattered, like their life had value and purpose. Her work with the Wolfpack became one of the most important things in her life. She would spend hours with these kids, not just during official training sessions, but whenever they needed her. If a young person called her at midnight because they were scared or in trouble, Breneisha would answer. If someone needed a ride to avoid a dangerous situation, she would drop everything to help. Friends say that Breneisha had this incredible gift for seeing potential in people that others had given up on. She believed that every person deserved a chance to succeed, no matter what mistakes they'd made or what neighborhood they came from. Her family describes her as fiercely protective of the people she loved. She was the type of person who would give you her last dollar if you needed it, who would fight for you when you couldn't fight for yourself. This loyalty and generosity made her beloved in her community, but it also meant she sometimes trusted people who didn't deserve that trust. By July 2023, Breneisha was building something beautiful, a music career that was gaining momentum and a community impact that was changing young lives every single day. July 2023 was supposed to be a time of celebration for Breneisha Lightfoot. Her birthday was coming up, and like every year, she was excited to spend time with the people who mattered most to her. Breneisha loved her birthday week. It was always filled with family gatherings, friends stopping by, and that special energy that comes when someone you care about is happy. In the days leading up to July 15th, Breneisha seemed like her usual self. She was active on social media, posting updates about her music and sharing moments with friends. She talked to family members regularly, making plans for her birthday celebration and discussing upcoming projects with the Wolfpack team. Her family remembers those early July conversations as completely normal. Breneisha was in good spirits, talking about new songs she was working on and some exciting opportunities that were coming her way. She mentioned wanting to expand her work with the community kids and had ideas for new programs that could help even more young people. On July 15th, Breneisha celebrated her birthday. Friends and family gathered to mark another year of her life, sharing laughs, good food, and the kind of memories that make birthdays special. Photos from that day show Breneisha smiling, surrounded by people who loved her. She looked happy and relaxed, enjoying every moment of her special day. But something changed after that celebration. The woman who never went more than a few hours without checking in with someone suddenly went quiet. At first, her family didn't think much of it. Maybe she was tired from the birthday festivities. Maybe she was busy with work or music projects. People get busy, especially when they're juggling a music career and community work like Breneisha was. But as the hours turned into a full day, then 2 days, the silence became impossible to ignore. Breneisha's phone calls weren't being returned. Her text messages went unanswered. Her social media accounts, which she updated regularly, went completely silent. Her sister tried calling multiple times. Each call went straight to voicemail. She left messages asking Breneisha to call back, saying the family was getting worried. Nothing. Other family members started reaching out too. Cousins, aunts, close friends. Everyone was getting the same result. No response, no explanation. just silence from someone who was never silent. By July 17th, the worry had turned into real fear. This wasn't like Breneisha at all. She was the type of person who always let people know where she was and what she was doing. She understood that people cared about her, and she never wanted anyone to worry unnecessarily. Her family started calling around to mutual friends asking if anyone had heard from her. They checked with people from the Wolfpack team, thinking maybe she was involved in some emergency response training or helping a young person in crisis. But nobody had seen or heard from her. The calls kept going to voicemail. The text messages kept going unread. Each unanswered attempt to reach her felt like another piece of evidence that something was terribly wrong. What would you do if someone you loved suddenly stopped responding to all contact? If a person who always stayed in touch just vanished without explanation? It's a situation that fills you with dread because deep down you know that people don't just disappear for no reason. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced that growing panic when someone important to you goes silent? By July 18th, Breneisha's family couldn't wait any longer. The fear that had been building for days had reached a breaking point. They knew they needed help, and they knew they needed it immediately. That Tuesday afternoon, they made the call that would change everything. Tuesday, July 18th, 2023. Officers were handling routine calls, traffic stops, when the call came in and turned a normal Tuesday into something none of them would ever forget. Breneisha's family had reached their breaking point. 3 days of silence from someone who never went silent was 3 days too many. When they called the Bedford police to request a welfare check, you could hear the worry in their voices. They explained the situation clearly. Breneisha Lightfoot lived alone in her apartment, and nobody had heard from her since her birthday celebration. This wasn't normal behavior for her. The officers who responded to the call drove to Breneisha's apartment building with the expectation that they'd probably find her safe inside, maybe dealing with a personal issue or simply needing some space. Welfare checks usually ended with relief, a person who was fine but just hadn't been in contact with family for whatever reason. But when the officers arrived at Breneisha's apartment, they immediately knew this wasn't going to be a routine welfare check. The first thing they noticed was that something felt wrong. The apartment was too quiet, too still. When they gained entry to check on Breneisha's welfare, what they found inside made their hearts sink. There were clear signs of violence. The apartment showed evidence of a struggle. Furniture moved, items knocked over, the kind of scene that tells a story no officer wants to read. It was obvious that something terrible had happened in that space. But the most telling piece of evidence was Breneisha's phone, sitting there in the apartment like a silent witness to whatever had occurred. This was the phone that family members had been calling for days, the phone that had been going straight to voicemail. Now they understood why their calls weren't being answered. The officers searched every room, every closet, every possible space where Breneisha might be, but she wasn't there. The apartment held evidence of violence, but no sign of Breneisha herself. The Bedford police immediately launched a full investigation. They put out alerts to other law enforcement agencies. They began canvassing the neighborhood, talking to anyone who might have seen or heard something. The community quickly learned that their beloved Ahlotta was missing, and people started joining the search efforts. For 3 agonizing days, the search continued. Family members, friends, community volunteers, and law enforcement officers combed through Cleveland, looking for any sign of Breneisha. The Wolfpack team mobilized. The kids she had mentored joined the search. Everyone who knew her refused to give up hope. But on Friday morning, July 21st, the call that everyone had been dreading finally came in. A body had been found in Cleveland's Slavic Village neighborhood. The location was several miles from Breneisha's apartment, in an area that seemed to have no connection to her daily life. When police arrived at the scene, their worst fears were confirmed. It was Breneisha. The news hit her family like a physical blow. The woman who had spent her life helping others, who had dedicated herself to keeping young people safe, had become a victim herself. The phone calls they had been making, the search efforts they had organized, the hope they had been clinging to, it all came crashing down in that moment. Her community was devastated. The kids she worked with couldn't understand how someone so full of life could be gone. Her fellow musicians mourned the loss of a rising star, whose voice had been silenced forever. The discovery of Breneisha's body marked the end of the search, but it was just the beginning of a much darker investigation into who had taken her life and why. With Breneisha's body discovered, the Bedford police and Cleveland detectives knew they were now dealing with a homicide investigation. The evidence from her apartment told them this wasn't a random crime. Someone had specifically targeted Breneisha, and investigators were determined to find out who. The investigation began by looking at the people closest to Breneisha. Detectives interviewed family members, friends, and colleagues from the Wolfpack team. They examined her phone records, social media accounts, and recent activities to build a timeline of her final days. As investigators dug deeper into Breneisha's life, one name kept coming up: Murd3red Nugent. Friends and family told police that Breneisha had been involved with this man, though the exact nature of their relationship was still being pieced together. When detectives started looking into Murd3red Nugent's background, red flags immediately began appearing. This wasn't someone with a clean record who had simply made one terrible mistake. Murd3red Nugent had a criminal history that painted a disturbing picture of escalating violence. His past included charges related to domestic violence, showing a pattern of aggressive behavior toward women. There were also drug offenses and other criminal activities that suggested someone who lived on the wrong side of the law. Most concerning were incidents that showed he had a history of not being able to control his anger, especially in relationships. Investigators discovered that Murd3red Nugent had been in Breneisha's life during the weeks leading up to her disappearance. People who knew them both described a relationship that seemed troubled from the outside. Some friends had expressed concerns about him, noting that he didn't seem like the type of person Breneisha usually associated with. The more police learned about Murd3red Nugent, the more convinced they became that he was their primary suspect. His criminal background, his connection to Breneisha, and his presence in her life during the critical time period all pointed in his direction. But there was one major problem. Murd3red Nugent was nowhere to be found. When police went to locate him for questioning, he had vanished. His known addresses turned up empty. Friends and associates claimed they hadn't seen him. It was as if he had disappeared right around the same time Breneisha went missing. This disappearing act only strengthened investigators' suspicions. Innocent people don't usually run and hide when police want to talk to them about a missing person case. The fact that Murd3red Nugent had made himself scarce suggested he knew exactly why police would be looking for him. A manhunt began. Police put out alerts to law enforcement agencies across Ohio and neighboring states. They checked with probation officers, known associates, and anyone who might have information about where Murd3red Nugent could be hiding. The community was outraged when they learned about the suspect's background. Here was a man with a history of violence against women, and somehow he had gotten close enough to Breneisha to hurt her. People couldn't understand how someone so dedicated to helping others had ended up as a victim of someone with such a dark past. Days turned into weeks as the search for Murd3red Nugent continued. Police followed leads across multiple states, checking homeless shelters, cheap motels, and anywhere else someone might try to lay low. They worked with federal authorities since the suspect had likely crossed state lines. The break in the case came when law enforcement received a tip about Murd3red Nugent's location. Acting quickly, officers moved in to make the arrest that Breneisha's family and community had been waiting for. When Murd3red Nugent was finally taken into custody, it marked a crucial turning point in the investigation. But his arrest was just the beginning of uncovering the full truth about what had happened to Breneisha during those final, terrifying moments of her life. As Murd3red Nugent faced trial for Breneisha's murder, the courtroom was packed with her family, friends, and community members who had come to see justice served. The case that had started with a worried family's phone call was now reaching its conclusion in a Cleveland courtroom. The prosecution painted a clear picture of what had happened. They presented evidence showing that Murd3red Nugent had been in Breneisha's apartment on the night she disappeared. The signs of struggle, the violence that had occurred in her home, and the timeline of events all pointed to one conclusion. Murd3red Nugent had killed Breneisha Lightfoot. Prosecutors highlighted Murd3red Nugent's criminal history, showing the jury a pattern of violence that had escalated to murder. They explained how his past domestic violence charges demonstrated his inability to control his anger, especially toward women. This wasn't someone who had simply snapped in a moment of rage. This was someone with a documented history of hurting people. The evidence against Murd3red Nugent was overwhelming. Physical evidence from Breneisha's apartment, witness testimony about their relationship, and the timeline of events all supported the prosecution's case. His decision to flee after Breneisha's disappearance only made him look more guilty. During the trial, Breneisha's family had to relive the worst moments of their lives. They listened to testimony about how their beloved daughter, sister, and friend had died. They heard details about the violence she had suffered. But they also got to tell the court about who Breneisha really was: the community advocate, the rising musician, the young woman who had dedicated her life to helping others. The defense tried to create doubt about Murd3red's guilt, but the evidence was too strong. The jury could see clearly what had happened in Breneisha's apartment that night, and they could see who was responsible. When the verdict was announced, there was a collective sigh of relief in the courtroom. Murd3red was found guilty of murder. The man who had taken Breneisha's life would now face the consequences of his actions. The judge's sentencing reflected the severity of the crime. Murd3red was sentenced to 23 to 28.5 years in prison at Lorraine Correctional Institution. The judge spoke about the impact of his crime, not just on Breneisha's family, but on the entire community that had lost someone so valuable. For Breneisha's family, the verdict brought a sense of closure, though it could never bring back the person they had lost. Her sister spoke outside the courthouse about feeling that justice had been served, but also about the empty space that Breneisha's death had left in their lives. The community members who had supported the family throughout the trial expressed relief that Murd3red would spend years in prison. The kids Breneisha had worked with could finally know that the person who had taken their mentor away has gone to prison. What do you think about the justice system in cases like this? Do you feel that 2 to 3 decades in prison truly serves justice for someone who takes another person's life? Share your thoughts in the comments below about whether you believe justice was truly served in Breneisha's case. The news of Breneisha's death hit Cleveland like a thunderbolt. Her family was completely destroyed by the loss. Her mother could barely get out of bed for weeks. Her father walked around the house like a ghost, touching things that reminded him of his daughter. Her siblings struggled to understand why their sister was gone forever. The grief was overwhelming for everyone who knew her. Friends from school cried together in the hallways. Teachers who had watched her grow up felt like they had lost their own child. The entire community seemed to be in shock. How could someone so young and full of life be taken away so suddenly? But even in their deepest pain, Breneisha's family knew they had to do something. They couldn't let her death be meaningless. Her mother started speaking at community meetings about gun violence. She told everyone about her daughter's dreams and how those dreams were stolen by senseless violence. Her voice shook when she spoke, but she kept going because she knew Breneisha would want her to fight. The Wolfpack gunshot response team became even more important after Breneisha's death. They had tried to save her that terrible night, and now they were determined to prevent other families from going through the same pain. They started new programs in schools to teach kids about conflict resolution. They worked with local churches to create safe spaces for young people. Every time they responded to a shooting, they thought about Breneisha and worked even harder to help the victims. The community came together in ways that surprised everyone. Neighbors who had never spoken before started talking about how to make their streets safer. Local businesses donated money for youth programs. Churches opened their doors for grief counseling sessions. People realized that they all shared the same fear and the same hope for their children. Her friends started a mentoring program for younger kids in the neighborhood. They remembered how Breneisha always looked out for others, and they wanted to continue that spirit. They met with middle school students every week, helping them with homework and talking about staying away from violence. The healing process was slow and painful. Some days were harder than others. Her mother still cried when she saw Breneisha's favorite foods at the grocery store. Her father still expected to hear her voice calling from upstairs. But gradually, the family found ways to honor her memory while learning to live with their loss. The community learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means taking the love you had for someone and using it to help others. Breneisha's legacy became bigger than her death, inspiring people to work for the kind of world she had dreamed of creating. Breneisha's story teaches us painful but important lessons that we cannot ignore. Her death wasn't just a random tragedy, it was the result of warning signs that were missed, and a system that failed to protect her from someone with a history of violence. Most important lesson is about recognizing the warning signs of domestic violence. Murd3red didn't suddenly become violent the night he killed Breneisha. He had a documented history of hurting women, yet somehow he was still free to form new relationships and continue his pattern of abuse. This shows us how our justice system sometimes fails to protect potential victims from repeat offenders. We need to understand that domestic violence often escalates over time. It might start with controlling behavior, jealousy, or verbal abuse. Then it can progress to physical violence, and in the worst cases, murder. Friends and family members who notice these warning signs need to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable or difficult. Breneisha's friends later admitted they had concerns about Rory Nugent, but they didn't know how to express those concerns effectively. This is something many people struggle with. How do you tell someone you care about that their partner seems dangerous? How do you intervene without pushing them away? Breneisha's work with the Wolfpack team shows us the power of community intervention. She spent her time teaching people life-saving skills and conflict resolution. These programs work because they give people alternatives to violence and show them that their community cares about their safety. The most powerful lesson from Breneisha's story is that one person really can make a difference. She touched countless lives through her music, her community work, and her kindness. Even in death, her story continues to inspire people to work for change. We cannot let Breneisha's death be meaningless. We must use her story to educate others, to push for better laws protecting domestic violence victims, and to create communities where people like Murd3red Nugent cannot continue hurting others. Breneisha's legacy should be a world where young women can pursue their dreams without fear, where warning signs are taken seriously, and where communities protect their most vulnerable members. Breneisha Lightfoot's story began with a young woman full of dreams and ended with a community forever changed by her loss. We followed her journey from a rising rap star and community advocate to a victim of domestic violence, and finally to a symbol of the changes we desperately need in our society. Her family's frantic phone calls when she went silent, the devastating discovery in her apartment, and the search that ended in heartbreak remind us how quickly violence can destroy a life. The investigation that revealed Murd3red Nugent's history of abuse, his cowardly attempt to flee, and his eventual conviction show us both the failures and successes of our justice system. But perhaps most importantly, we've seen how Breneisha's death sparked a movement. Her community refused to let her story end with tragedy. Instead, they turned their grief into action, creating programs to help others and working to prevent future violence. What did Breneisha's story teach you? Have you ever noticed warning signs of domestic violence in someone you know? How do you think we can better protect people in dangerous relationships? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might help someone else recognize danger or find the courage to seek help. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more true crime stories that matter. Let us know in the comments what cases you'd like us to cover next. Together we can make sure stories like Breneisha's are never forgotten and that the lessons they teach us create real change in our communities.